I should have some sleigh bells that I'm ringing or something. Get us in the mood. Ching, 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 ching. Well, yeah, tomorrow night you'll hear a sled land on your roof. Hopefully, dropping off lots of extra fantasy points for your Week 16 lineups. All right,
I
folks.
need them.
Yeah, seriously, every point. We can use them all. Let's go live. What is up with the Steelers defense? That and more this week on the IDP Roundtable. John Norton, the guru. John, this Steelers defense doesn't look like the Steelers defense we saw, I don't know, even just a couple of weeks ago in more than one. What are some ways that we can discern to at least help us with our IDP lineup decisions this week?
Well, I don't know how much it can really help us with our IDP decisions, other than to kind of avoid some of this mess. But both sides of the ball, it's hard to figure out what's going on there. I'll leave the offensive side to the guys that pay attention to offense. But as far as the defensive side, it's really not all that difficult to figure out what the big problem is. All you have to do is look at their starting lineup this week. Avery Williamson, starting inside linebacker, has been with the team for about 4 weeks now. The other starting inside linebacker for this game is Marcus Allen, who's a backup safety. You have Alex Highsmith starting at one of the outside linebacker positions, rookie who's just really not ready to be in the lineup yet. And the effect of this on a defense that is used to putting up the big plays and basically relies on the big plays and the splash plays to be the solid, strong defense that they are. They just don't have those players. Avery Williamson's a solid guy. He's a good veteran linebacker, doesn't make a lot of dumb mistakes, but he's not a playmaker either. All your playmakers have just taken turns going out of the lineup one after another with injuries. So fortunately for them, they will get Vincent Williams back this week. I don't know that that's going to be huge as far as big plays go, other than the fact that he can get after the passer a little bit. So that'll be a help there. Matchup's not particularly great, but I just don't think until we get some of these guys back on the field that we can expect the kind of production from the Steelers defensive players that we've gotten in the past. I do like Williamson in tackle heavy leagues this week. I think he's going to have plenty of opportunity to make a lot of tackles. But beyond that, I don't think there's a whole lot there for us.
Yeah, I'll probably see a lot of Jonathan Taylor, Naeem Hines out of the backfield as a receiver. And even the guys like Mike Hilton, TJ Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick, all these guys falling off in the big play category. One of the best things about Week 16 is it feels like this is the last scene in the movie, right? Like it was all building to this. Matt Schauf, Draft Sharks. Was it all building to us putting Isaiah Simmons in our lineups in Week 16?
It was not. It was exciting last week that Isaiah Simmons got on the field a bunch. He saw a season high in snap share. It was a season high in total snaps by an even wider margin. But it looks like it was at least in part opponent specific. Devondre Campbell was down as well. So, I mean, if you look at just the numbers, you would think that maybe Isaiah Simmons has taken over the job. But Isaiah Simmons spent a lot more time on the edge than in any other game this year. And afterward, Cliff Kingsbury talked about having his fast guys out there, Hassan Reddick and Isaiah Simmons, for this game against Jalen Hurts, trying to spy him, trying to contain him, trying to chase him. So we'll see if Isaiah Simmons is on the field more this week. I don't think that it will ramp up from what it was last week. I would bet that it goes down some from where it was last week because they're not going to have more opponents like they did then. And CJ Beathard can run a little bit, but he's not Jalen Hurts. So I would imagine that we get a little bit less Isaiah Simmons on the field this week. He still just had 5 tackles, even in that extra playing time. He's really had just one good fantasy outing all season. So there's not nearly enough for us to play Isaiah Simmons in lineups right now. Still like him for going forward. And I mean, if the coaches spend all season not playing him enough, and then they think that his speed is worth getting on the field for a game like this and his versatility. He also played a bunch of other positions. I believe he opened the game at like a DB spot. So it's clear that they see something in him. It just hasn't been enough to get him on the field regularly. So I remain optimistic for the long term, but certainly not for Week 16.
And is Dennis Gardeck the most unlikely sack master in NFL history?
I went back and looked just to make sure after I saw that he had 3 sacks over the previous 2 games before this past week, just to make sure I wasn't missing something. The guy played 11 total snaps.
Right.
in those games, and he had 3 sacks. He had 2 more against the Eagles, played 24 snaps in that one. Thank goodness, not to be mean, but thank goodness he injured a knee in that game, so I don't have to decide this week.
Yeah, and we wish him and his family a great. Yeah, I think he had like 100 snaps all year, and he's been incredible. And he was like a Division II, a special teams ace, really.
Dennis Gardeck is the name of a 1980s hockey player. That guy is not a 2020 football player.
Right. It's all a figment of our imagination, just like Des Bryant catching a touchdown pass. Something that's not a figment of our imagination, John. I try to catch this because it's Kansas City, and the teams are going to have to pass, maybe uncomfortably pass behind playing Patrick Mahomes. Didn't seem like Rashad Breeland was doing it. Tarvarius Ward. But there is an answer that was good for us at the beginning of the year, coming back just in time for Week 16. Who is the one cornerback in Kansas City that we can trust?
We talked about him a little bit last week. L'Jarius Sneed, rookie, came out of the beginning of the season, was playing a lot, mostly in the number 3 role in the slot and so forth. The guy just seems like he's everywhere. He made a bunch of tackles in the first 2 games, got hurt, was gone for several games, got back on the field here a couple weeks ago. He's played 5 games this year. He's played 90% of the snaps in 3 of those 5 games, including the Week 15 matchup. In 4 of those games, he's put up at least 13 fantasy points, including all 3 of the 90% games. They're moving him around a little bit. They're using him kind of as a big nickel type extra safety / slot corner / do whatever you need to do with him. If you've got a problem, somebody you need to spy, put Sneed on him because he's the best guy out there that we've got to do that. I mean, the guy's just showing up all over the place. He's rushing the passer at times. They've got him doing a little bit of everything, but the important thing for us is that he's making plays and doing something with all of those opportunities. I've stashed him away on every dynasty league that I can get him on, especially the ones that we have to start corners. He won me a couple of games last week because I benched the guys that I had been starting and put him in my lineup, and he had another good game. This is a guy that's just it's very difficult to find consistency and solid production from the corner position because it's so much variation from week to week based on offensive game plans and so forth. But every now and then we come up with somebody like this. It just seems to, no matter what they do with him, he manages to make plays wherever they put him. And maybe that's by design. Maybe they're intentionally putting him in those positions to be that type of playmaker. But whatever the reason being, Sneed's getting it done for us.
Yeah, maybe somebody that folks get to know better in January, maybe even in the Super Bowl. Okay, take a deep breath, Matt. I hope you're hydrated because I want you to go over the injuries this week. There's a lot. And this week, more than ever, we want to make sure folks are up to date. And it's not always as easy to find information on injuries on the IDP side as it is on the offensive side. But at least a starting point, situations to monitor, other situations to know about on the injury front. Take it away, Matt.
Yeah, I almost had to skip the show because I was too busy typing down injury guys to watch for. Quinnen Williams, we know, is going to be out because he's on IR with a neck injury, which is unfortunate after the season he has had. Trevon Coley might be a familiar name to people. He looks like the next man up for the Jets. He just joined the team on waivers from the Cardinals. Spent a few games at starter level play for the Cardinals. So he could be if we had DFS for IDP, Trevon Coley would be the guy for like $2,500 that you put in your lineup. But since we don't, he's basically nothing for us season long, folks. Brian Burns, the knee injury, did not practice Wednesday. Matt Rule says he's not optimistic. So we'll watch Brian Burns, but don't count on having him in your lineup. Looks like he's not going to be around. Bradley Chubb suffered an ankle injury over the weekend. No practice for him Wednesday, so we'll have to watch him heading into that matchup with the Chargers. Could be an upside matchup, but we'll have to watch his participation. Jamie Collins has a neck injury. He didn't practice Tuesday or Wednesday. He doesn't have a great matchup against Tampa Bay. So I would move forward planning not to have Jamie Collins right now. There are probably better options available, both because of the injury and because of the matchup. On the other side of that one, Antoine Winfield Jr. has a shoulder injury. Kept him out Tuesday. He returned to a limited practice Wednesday, though. So it seems like he's trending toward playing. We'll watch him. Carlton Davis has a groin injury that pulled him from last week's game. He missed Tuesday. He missed Wednesday. So he's not trending in the right direction. And even though Carlton Davis left that game early, Jamel Dean returned from a groin injury himself. His playing time was down from where it was before his injury, 78% in that game. So you would think Jamel Dean would be a full-time player in Carlton Davis's absence. Maybe that's the case this week, but we can't count on it after lower playing time last week. So Jamel Dean's an option, but don't consider him a safe bet for 100% playing time. The Raiders have a bunch of issues again. Jonathan Abraham, he's coming back from a concussion, returned for limited practice Tuesday. I didn't check his Wednesday status yet, but it seems like they expect Abram to play, so we should have him available. Eric Harris, another safety, hit the COVID list Monday, so we'll see if that's close contact or a positive test, but he's probably not available. Nick Kwiatkowski hit the COVID list Wednesday, so he's likely not available. That should mean more time for Corey Littleton, and it could be even more time if Nicholas Morrow has an issue. So he missed last week's game with a concussion, came back for a limited practice Tuesday, but then was out Wednesday with a non-injury reason. I don't know what it is yet. So we're going to have to wait and see what that is, see if that jeopardizes Morrow's participation for Week 16. If he's out, then Corey Littleton's all of a sudden the number one linebacker for the Raiders. Kyle Wilbur, Raekwon McMillan would join him in the starting lineup. So we might end the season actually getting useful numbers from Corey Littleton when we've given up on him otherwise. Sheldon Richardson has a neck injury for the Browns. Kevin Stefanski said Monday he might not practice all week. It's going to be tough to trust him in lineup if that's the case. We'll see. Hassan Reddick has a shoulder injury. Didn't practice Tuesday, but came back for a limited Wednesday. Tre'Davious White shoulder injury. Seems like he's going to play. We'll watch him, though, of course. Leighton Vander Esch seems like he's not going to play. High ankle sprain. Sean Lee is expected to start in his place. And, I mean, if we are going to get full playing time from Sean Lee, he might be worth like a low LB3 level play against the Eagles. Cole Holcomb has the concussion that kept him out last week. He suffered that during the practice week, still not practicing Wednesday, so we're going to have to watch him to see when he's able to come back. Kazir White landed on IR today. They haven't said what the injury is yet, so we'll see, but his season's done. That means Nick Vigil will be in the lineup most likely again with Kenneth Murray. Nick Vigil has reached 60% playing time in 3 of his past 4 games, 8+ tackles in each of those 3 games that he did that. Talked about the Chiefs. At linebacker, Damian Wilson missed last week. He still wasn't practicing Wednesday. Anthony Hitchens landed on the COVID list Tuesday, so we could see both of those guys miss this week. Ben Neiman led the group with 85% playing time against the Saints. 8 tackles in that game. That doubled his nearest teammate. It was 21.6% of the team total, so Ben Neiman certainly in play. Taylor Rapp, Micah Kiser, not expected back for Week 16, maybe not the rest of the year. And then finally, Quentin Dunbar, planning to play through a knee injury that might require off-season surgery, but we'll have to watch this week. He did not come back off of IR last week to play Washington.
Well done. Well done. And we got more, John. We got more. There's Joey Bosa with a concussion. We'll watch to see if he's going to be ready for the game against the Broncos. Ifeadi Odenigbo, Christmas ankle. We'll see if he's there. Josh Sweat, who's made some pretty big plays for the Eagles, has a wrist. And one other injury for the Patriots that may give us one of the more unlikely players, more unlikely than L'Jarius Sneed, to trust in Week 16 lineups.
Yeah, Juan Bentley out with the arm injury. Haven't really heard an update whether he's going to make it back yet or not. Whether he does or not, Terez Hall has been seeing a lot of action. I would suggest in dynasty formats, go get him if you can stash him, if you can pick him up and possibly even play him this week. This is a guy, he's basically replaced Bentley for 2 games this year. In those 2 contests, he has 20 tackles and 3 assists. Has one other game where he played 30 snaps and put up 6 tackles and 2 assists. On a per snap basis, the guy's just lighten it up. If you basically projected his snap total in his production so far over a full season, around 900 snaps, he's like 106 tackles and 66 assists and so forth. Guys basically in kind of an unknown, undrafted rookie free agent out of Missouri, put up pretty good numbers at Missouri. Has really stepped up and kind of started quietly creeping into the lineup and seeing some snaps every week. He's been getting on the field now for about 5 or 6 weeks in a row in a limited basis. But with Bentley possibly being out this week, looks like he's going to be the go-to guy for New England. A lot of times I wouldn't trust that, but under the current circumstances, they really don't have a whole lot of other options. So it looks like Terez Hall might be a sneaky good pickup and stick in your lineup this week.
Maybe there's nothing sneaky about him, Matt, but looking at this matchup Saturday night, Raiders and Dolphins, if Marcus Mariota is the starter, I don't understand what John Gruden is doing right now with his reps in practice, but if Mariota is the starter and they need a linebacker to match that athleticism, Jerome Baker's back and maybe back just in time for fantasy Super Bowls.
Yeah, we've complained about his dip in playing time previously, so we got to praise it when it's bounced back and his production's back. 17 tackles over the past 2 games. The playing time has rebounded. He's been good even when the other linebackers are healthy. 3.5 sacks over the past 2 games. For the year now, Jerome Baker is a top 16 linebacker. I mean, depending on your format, but he's up there. And the Raiders come in as a neutral linebacker matchup overall, but over the past 5 weeks, top 5 in terms of fantasy points allowed to the position. So Jerome Baker is inside my top 10 this week. He's pretty much a lock play in this game.
Speaking about playing time, linebackers, John, it seems like we've had a Washington linebacker update almost every week. And we already heard about Cole Holcomb, who had become semi-dependable there. He's got the concussion. Kevin Pierre-Louis, the ankle. They did bring back Michael Kendricks, remember him? But that's not the name that we may look at if we need a starter in a pinch this week. Who would we like from Washington's linebackers?
Well, the most important thing we got to do here is pay real good attention towards the end of the week and see who's actually practicing. You should mention they picked up Kendricks to add some depth there. I really don't expect him to see a whole lot of time. I think Kevin Pierre-Louis actually practiced on a limited basis today. Cole Holcomb still out and so forth. But the guy that surprisingly got on the field last week, we would think with when all these guys go down, they would eventually get down to Thomas Davis, but that was not the case. Instead, they put Kalike Hudson on the field. And he did a respectable job. Really didn't get a chance to watch the game close enough to see how he did play-by-play, but numbers suggest 4 tackles and 4 assists that he did an all right job as far as that goes. Washington hung in the game. The defense didn't get killed, so they're basically down to we have to start whoever we've got left that's healthy at this point, and it looks like that might be the guy that is left that's healthy that they can get on the field in a decent matchup.
And if they get past that, they'll get to where the Steelers were last week. You brought us some good news about playing time for Isaiah Simmons, some good news about playing time for Jerome Baker. Matt, maybe some bad news. Who are some players whose playing time are falling you need to know about as you set your lineups for this week?
Yeah, we can't be all sunshine and rainbows. On the falling side, Josh Jones has been a good bet for tackles for us when he's been healthy this season. But last week, he dipped to 53% playing time against the Ravens, despite a key interception in that game. I haven't seen any indication of injury. He's not on the injury report this week, so it looks like he just got pulled for Andrew Wingard at some point during that game. I haven't watched that game back because I care about myself too much. So I don't know what it is, but you can't play Josh Jones this week. Mike Hilton, you alluded to earlier with the Steelers, he was down to 50% playing time against the Bengals last week. He had played 79% each of the previous 2. That was back up to the level he started at early in the season when he had the 3 big games to begin the year. But now he has sandwiched those 2 games in between 3 others of 55% or less. So we don't know for sure how much Mike Hilton's going to be on the field this week against the Colts. It's an okay matchup, certainly an offense more capable of forcing action at Mike Hilton than Cincinnati's offense was last week. So if Mike Hilton gets a playing time, he could produce, but it's been a while since those big games early in the season. So I'd have a tough time trusting Mike Hilton. He's in my rankings, but he's not close to real starter territory. Trevon Diggs returned from IR last week, only played 51% of the snaps against the 49ers. That could be a case, though, of a guy coming off missing 4 games with a fracture in his foot. Maybe he's ready to ramp that up this week against the Eagles. Philly started the season as a terrific matchup for DB scoring. The current iteration of the Eagles is not a great spot. It's a lower floor spot. There's a less of a chance with Jalen Hurts in there than with Carson Wentz that Trevon Diggs can get to the scoring floor. More of a chance that he lets you down. So I think combine that with the 51% playing time, I would be a little wary of playing Trevon Diggs this week. And then finally, Matt Milano. He's been back for 3 games now, I believe, from IR with the pec injury. He has not reached 50% playing time in any of them, down to 39% last week against the Broncos. And A.J. Klein was still at just 56%. So we're at a point now where we can't use either of those guys. It's Tremaine Edmonds and nobody else among Bills linebackers.
Matt, Brian Sumner in the chat room says, if you don't follow Schauf for content, You need to follow him for humor. Dude is hilarious. Yeah. We've been having you play like a straight man. Tell me one of your inspirations. Where do you get your comic stylings from? Who did little Matt Schauf like to watch in stand-up comedy?
It's really just rocking material around the house with the kids all week.
Dad jokes.
Cool. I get a lot more practice time around here. I mean, there's a long list of comedians that I like to watch. I'm certainly way into comedy.
Yeah, no, it's good, folks. We always, hey, getting through 2020, we're almost there. If you can't laugh, especially at yourself, then it was going to be difficult. Sometimes whenever we watch the Super Bowl and a team will win, and we immediately think about a player like, oh, I'm really glad he got a ring. And certainly, I know, John, if the Seahawks make the Super Bowl, Carlos Dunlap gets a ring. I'd imagine that will probably warm your heart. But maybe, can he help us get a ring for our IDP teams this week against the Rams?
You might be able to. I want to make one quick comment on Josh Jones.
Sure.
He missed a couple of games with a shoulder injury, and even though they don't list him as having an issue with that, guys with bum shoulders sometimes aren't as aggressive as they would normally be and so forth, and those things tend to linger. So a lot of times that guys with sore shoulders tend to get that injury gets lost in everything, and we kind of forget about it because we see them on the field and they look fine. They just hesitate to put their shoulder in there and hit anybody. So Carlos Dunlap, we've talked about him for a couple of weeks. Matt talked about him last week, sore foot and all that good stuff. So here's where we are with Carlos Dunlap. And I've done a lot of thinking on this one because 2 of the 3 leagues that I'm still alive in, I have to make a decision on whether I'm playing him this week. Can we play him this week? He was active in week 14, did not play. We know he had a sore foot. He lobbied to get on the field last week more in a couple of key situations. They had him on a snap count. He was only going to play about 15 to 20 snaps. They got into a situation. He went over and started pulling on the coach's shirt. Let me go in, coach. Come on, let me go in. They put him on the field, and voila, he comes up with a sack, makes a big play in the game, and helps them get the win. Now we're looking at a guy that's 3 weeks, going on 4 weeks removed from the injury. He's gotten better, obviously. He's healing up some. He played 23 snaps, I think it was, total last week, and came out without having any more issues and no significant setbacks to anything. And this week they have a game against a division rival in the Rams, which is an important game, not necessarily because they have to win it to get in, but if they do win it, they clinch the division. So you've got a guy that's healing up, going towards the playoffs, played a fair amount last week for somebody that's coming off of such an injury, and has an important game. And push comes to shove, the Seahawks really need to have him in the lineup this week because he makes their team a heck of a lot better. So I am leaning towards gambling on sticking Carlos Dunlap in my lineup in at least one of my 2 leagues. The other one, I have some pretty good other options. But I think in a push comes to shove situation, unless you have some pretty good options out there, he's worth giving some consideration this week.
Brian in the chat room points out that Pete Carroll said he was going to practice. So that's a good sign. Patience is important, Matt. Don't be like me. Don't put Justin Houston in ambulance chasing, as John will put it, after he had a big game, and bench Alden Smith, who had been my number 2, left some points on the bench and went home because of that. Who are a few other defensive linemen you should stick with for week 16?
I mean, this might be the toughest position in fantasy because guys can have an excellent game and put up no stats. So there are times where we can get it right and still get it wrong. But these guys I would stick with this week. Chris Jones was empty against New Orleans, and maybe you don't need to be talked into playing Chris Jones. I know where I have him, I'm just playing him in a D-tackle spot. But he has just 1 sack over the past 5 games, so you might be not willing to play him. It was at Miami. 7 QB hits over that span, though, including 2 against the Saints last week in that aforementioned empty game. 24 hits on the season. That's 4 more than he had last year in the same number of games. It's just 5 hits behind his 15.5 sack 2018. So he's producing. He's playing well. Week 6 at Buffalo is the only time where he had 0 QB hits. He's getting to the quarterback. He just needs to get there a little bit quicker to get us a sack. He's had 2+ QB hits in 8 games this year. I'm playing him this week. I expect them to pull ahead of the Falcons and leave Atlanta chasing and throwing more often, which should only create more opportunities for Chris Jones. There's big game potential to him anytime he's on the field. Brandon Graham has been down lately, and it's been more than just like hidden production not getting to the quarterback. His performance hasn't been quite to its normal level, but The playing time's been fine. The performance has been up and down. It's not like it's been a straight down stretch. Just 4 total tackles over the past 3 games, 1 solo tackle in each of those. He's never been a big tackle guy, though. We know that about him. So if it's a tackle-heavy league, then you probably shouldn't be using Brandon Graham anyway. No sack since week 8 is the weird thing, though. No quarterback hits in his past 2 games. Some down games for pressures in that range as well. But the last time he did have a sack came against the Cowboys. He had 4 pressures in that game. He reached that number in 1 of 5 games since. There's risk here, but he's playing that Dallas team again. Dallas is still tied for 10th most sacks allowed in the league. Brandon Graham's not a definite play, but if you're looking in a range where there's a bunch of risk-reward guys, I think Brandon Graham is toward the top of that group. Yannick Ngakoue has been a dud for nearly all of his time in Baltimore. Maybe it was just a revenge game last week. They got him 2 sacks against Jacksonville, a forced fumble in that game, but he's got the Giants this week. They allowed 8 sacks to the Cardinals 2 weeks ago, so there's definitely the upside for him to at least get home once. And, I mean, if we can get 2 solos and a sack from Yannick Ngakoue, that's a good game from him at this point. Zach Allen kind of came out of nowhere against Philly. 11 tackles, 1 sack, 1 pass deflection. The thing, though, he lined up predominantly on the left side of the line in that game, and the Eagles had Matt Pryor sliding out from being a roller coaster right guard to playing right tackle. I mean, he was playing so well at guard that he was benched and put back in and benched and put back in. So they moved him out to right tackle for that game. He had a rough one. I factored that in with Hassan Reddick's outlook. I did not factor it in with Zach Allen's outlook because Zach Allen has given us basically nothing all season. But his playing time's been up recently. He's been over 70% playing time in 3 of his past 4 games. He played a season-high 89% against the Eagles, 74 total snaps in that game, so that helped. 17 more than in any other game this season and more than his previous 2 games combined. He does have a QB hit and a pass deflection in each of his past 2 games, though. And the only other game that Zach Allen had a sack in this season was against the Niners back in week 1. He had 2 total QB hits in that one. The Niners are a top 8 scoring matchup for D linemen on the season, so definitely a boom-bust spot, but there is some upside to Zach Allen. I think he's like low DL2 territory, high DL3 if you play in that deep a league. And Ndamukong Suh is interesting. Potential revenge game. I don't really believe in the revenge game things. They're fun to talk about. I don't actually believe it, but it can't hurt to play against the team that originally drafted him. And Ndamukong Suh did actually face the Lions each of the past 2 seasons. He had 2 QB hits in each of those games. The Lions have allowed 4+ sacks in 3 of their past 5 opponents. Suh already had 2. He's already 2 ahead of last year's total in quarterback hits, and his 5 sacks for this season are his most since 2016. So I say revenge game, but really, Ndamukong Suh is playing well. The Lions are playing poorly, so it's just a good matchup where there's upside for him. And then finally, the Bears duo, Akeem Hicks, has been very quiet lately, but he does have 5 quarterback hits over the past 2 games, so there's a bit of upside. He's close to 30 in my D-line rankings. Bilal Nichols, though, his teammate, has been hot lately. Sacks in 3 straight, 3 quarterback hits last week against Minnesota. They've got Jacksonville this week. Hasn't been an awesome sack matchup, but there's certainly upside to it, especially if the Bears get a lead and the defense is rolling.
Patience, and some good reasons to be patient with those players. And you're always patient, waiting to the end of the show. If Matt's notes whet your appetite, now we get to the Guru's starts and sits for the all-important Week 16.
Yeah, so go figure. The first guy on my list is Chris Jones against Atlanta.
It's a sign.
It's a sign, so great minds think alike. So, he's been hit or miss, like Matt said. He pretty much covered all the bases here. A couple of things I'll throw in there. The Falcons have been a pretty strong matchup for interior linemen from a tackle perspective. So even if he doesn't get to the quarterback, you've got a pretty good chance that he's going to put up at least 3 solo tackles in that game. Just the sack per game average since week 10 has been up as well. I like Chris Jones in this game as well. And Ndamukong Suh is another guy that's on my list. I do absolutely believe in the playing a former team as extra motivation because I've seen it over and over and over again. Just look back at Yannick Ngakoue last week. I plugged what the heck is his name? The defensive end, Calais Campbell last week as a potential starter. He wound up not getting to play because of the calf injury, but even he talked about how excited he was to try to get on the field and how hard he pushed to try to get into that game because he was playing against a former team. So maybe it's just a coincidence, but whether it's coincidence or not, it seems like we tend to get a lot of points in those situations. All right, a few other guys, Jonathan Hankins and possibly even Maurice Hurst against Miami. Not that either one of these guys have really done much. The Dolphins have allowed an average of 6.5 tackles per game to defensive tackles, with a sack and a half against opposing defensive tackles since week 10. So the numbers suggest that even though these guys really haven't done a heck of a lot, the opportunity is going to be there. I like Sam Hubbard and Carl Lawson this week against Houston. There's really, other than the safeties in Cincinnati, there's really not been a whole lot to get excited about as far as IDP guys on the defense. But the Texans have allowed a whopping 17 sacks over the last 3 games. And despite the team struggles, these two guys can get to the passer. I think they both have a good shot of landing a sack this week. J.J. Watt in that same game against Cincinnati. Watt's been pretty much a feast or famine guy this year. He's had 5 games where he scored double-digit points, and the other 9 games he scored 6 or fewer. The Bengals O-line is a great opportunity for one of his bigger games, and I think he steps up this week. And Troy Reeder, and we talked about last week at the top of the show about how you decide who you're going to start. You keep playing those guys that got you there and whatever. Troy Reeder was one of those guys that a lot of people benched last week because of the matchup with the Jets. Lo and behold, the Jets turn out and have their best game of the season. Reeder has 7 tackles, 4 assists, puts up a pretty good game. I was one of those guys that was guilty of having him on my bench. I like him this week against Seattle. They've been a stellar matchup for inside linebackers. We've seen several players exceed 15 points against them since week 9 at the inside linebacker positions, including Micah Kiser, who had 10 tackles and 2 assists before getting injured late in the game earlier in the season when these two teams met. Already talked a bit about Terez Hall, not on top of everything that he's got going on. Buffalo's a quality matchup as well. Avery Williamson against the Colts, covered that one. He's also a quality matchup. Malcolm Jenkins this week against the Vikings. Last 3 games, Josh Jones, 7 tackles, 3 assists against Minnesota. Antoine Winfield, 10 tackles, 2 assists, a sack, and a forced fumble. Eddie Jackson this past week, 5 tackles, 2 assists, and a pass defended. The Vikings have just been a quality matchup. Jenkins is one of those guys that can get it done in the right situation, come up with 10 tackles last week. Had another big game. Donovan Wilson versus Philadelphia. And we kind of joked about his every other week consistency earlier in the season, but he's kind of gotten over that. Missed a couple games there since he's been back. He's had 8 combined tackles in each of his last 3 games. And the Eagles are a dependable matchup for safeties. I like him going out there this week as well. The only guys I'm going to tell you not to start this week are your Colts pass rushers. You almost have to start DeForest Buckner, especially after the week that he had last week. But other than that, despite the Steelers' recent struggles, they've only allowed 2 sacks since week 9, 1 sack in each of the last 2 games. So your Justin Houstons and Denico Autry's and those guys, keep them on your bench this week.
And get Kenny Moore in, the Pro Bowl snub.
Get Kenny Moore in.
And he's going to jump some short Roethlisberger passes, 1 or 2 or 3. It's the neurotic Steelers fan talking, but this is your tip for this week. You don't tune in to listen to my tips, though. You tune in to listen to the guru, John Norton, part of the great IDP team at Football Guys, and Matt Schauf. And we're going to have like a next year, Matt, like a joke of the week or something, the Matt Schauf dad joke of the week or something. I don't know. But we're gonna use those extra talents. Also, you can catch him on a ton of Draft Sharks podcasts. All of his great content at Draft Sharks. Follow him at SCHAUF. We appreciate spending this time with you because IDP Fantasy Football we're a special breed, and we love everything about football and really dive into anything that gives us a better understanding and knowledge, better in our tremendous, challenging, more than ever leagues. But certainly, getting to make this content for you keeps us on point, and I hope it keeps you all on point and you enjoy the time that we do get to spend together. We'll be back next year, and we'll be checking with you in the offseason. Of course, IDP Fantasy Football. Football world never sleeps. But until then, have a great holiday, everybody. Thanks again for giving us your time and attention, giving us the privilege and pleasure of serving you. Always stay classy and play IDP Fantasy Football, the only real fantasy football.